My fiancé cheated with my best friend, then asked to use my venue. I discovered the betrayal on a Tuesday morning when I accidentally grabbed her phone instead of mine from the nightstand. The notification that lit up the screen made my blood run cold, a message from him that was far too intimate for just friendship. My hands trembled as I scrolled through weeks of conversations that painted a picture I never wanted to see. The venue had been my grandfather's restaurant before he passed it down to me 3 years ago. It wasn't much to look at from the outside, but inside it had this warm, rustic charm that made people feel at home. I'd been planning to propose there, in the same corner booth where my grandparents had their first date 60 years ago. Instead, I found myself sitting in that very booth, staring at evidence of the two people I trusted most in the world stabbing me in the back. She walked in around noon, humming some tune I didn't recognize. Her hair was still messy from sleep, and she was wearing my old college sweatshirt that hung loose on her small frame. For a moment, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined everything. But then she smiled at me with those same lips that had been kissing my best friend, and the illusion shattered. I set her phone on the table between us without saying a word. The color drained from her face as she realized what had happened. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the weight of 3 years together crumbling around us. She tried to explain, to rationalize, to make it seem like it wasn't what it looked like, but the messages were clear as day. They'd been meeting up for months, planning weekend trips when I thought she was visiting her sister, sharing inside jokes that suddenly made sense. The worst part wasn't even the cheating itself, it was how normal everything had seemed. We'd been discussing wedding plans just last week, looking at flower arrangements and arguing about whether to have a DJ or live band. She'd been so excited about using my venue for the reception, going on about how romantic it would be to get married where my family's legacy lived on. My best friend showed up that evening, probably expecting to find me alone and vulnerable. Instead, he found me boxing up 3 years' worth of shared memories. His face told me everything I needed to know before he even opened his mouth. We'd been friends since high school, been through everything together: failed relationships, career changes, family deaths. I'd been the best man at his wedding 2 years ago, had held his firstborn son in the hospital just last month. He tried to approach it like a business transaction, cool and calculated. Said they hadn't meant for it to happen, that they'd tried to fight it but couldn't deny their feelings anymore. The casual way he spoke about destroying my life made me want to put my fist through his face. But I just kept packing, letting him dig his own grave with every word. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor, my cousin from across town. She'd heard through the family grapevine that something was wrong and came to check on me. I'd always been close with her, but we'd grown apart over the years as life pulled us in different directions. She took one look at my face and knew I needed more than just a sympathetic ear. She suggested we take a drive to clear my head, and we ended up at this little diner about an hour outside town. Over coffee and pie, I found myself telling her everything, not just about the cheating, but about how trapped I'd felt lately, how I'd been going through the motions of planning a wedding I wasn't even sure I wanted anymore. She listened without judgment, occasionally reaching across the table to squeeze my hand when the words got too heavy. On the drive back, she dropped a bombshell that changed everything. She'd been thinking about starting her own catering business, but couldn't find a suitable venue to rent. She'd looked at my place months ago, but never asked because she didn't want to mix business with family. Now, with my personal life in ruins, she wondered if I'd consider partnering with her to transform the restaurant into something new. The idea hit me like lightnings. For years, I'd been running the place exactly as my grandfather had, never really making it my own. Maybe this disaster was the push I needed to finally step out of his shadow and create something that reflected who I was, not who I was supposed to be. But then came the phone call that made my situation even more complicated. She was crying, begging me to reconsider, saying she'd made a terrible mistake and wanted to work things out. Through her tears, she revealed something that made my stomach drop: she was pregnant. The timing was unclear, and she wasn't sure if the baby was mine or his. The pregnancy news sent my world spinning in a completely different direction. Suddenly, this wasn't just about betrayal and broken trust. There was a potential innocent life caught in the middle of this mess. She begged me to meet her at the coffee shop where we'd had our first date, claiming she had important things to tell me about the pregnancy and their affair. I arrived at the coffee shop to find her sitting in our old corner booth, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. She'd been crying, her eyes red and puffy, and her hands shook as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. What she told me next made me question everything I thought I knew about the situation. According to her, the affair had started as emotional support during a difficult time in our relationship that I'd been oblivious to. She'd been feeling neglected and lonely while I was consumed with expanding the restaurant business. He'd been going through his own marital problems, and they'd found comfort in each other's company. What began as innocent coffee dates had gradually escalated into something more. But the pregnancy had changed everything for both of them. The reality of potentially having a child forced them to confront what they'd been doing, and they decided to end things. She swore that she wanted to make our relationship work, that she'd do anything to earn back my trust. The desperate hope in her eyes almost broke my resolve. As we talked, I noticed him sitting at a table across the room, watching us nervously. It became clear that this wasn't a coincidence. They'd planned this intervention together. When I confronted them about it, they admitted they'd been hoping to convince me to forgive them both, to find a way to move forward as friends for the sake of the potential baby. The manipulation made my blood boil. Even in their confession, they were still scheming together, still treating me like a pawn in their game. I stood up to leave, but she grabbed my arm with surprising strength. What she said next stopped me cold. They wanted to get married at my venue, claiming it would be healing for all of us to celebrate new beginnings in a place that meant so much to our friendship. The audacity of the request left me speechless. After months of betrayal, after destroying my trust and potentially carrying a child that might not even be mine, they wanted to use my family's legacy as the backdrop for their wedding. The venue that held my grandfather's memory, where I'd planned to propose, where I'd envisioned starting my own family. I looked at both of them sitting there, waiting for my response, and realized that this moment would define how I moved forward with my life. I could let their betrayal consume me, or I could use it as fuel to build something better. The choice was mine, and for the first time in months, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. The pregnancy test results came back 2 weeks later. The baby was mine. This revelation changed everything once again, forcing me to confront the reality that I'd be connected to both of them for the rest of my life, regardless of what happened between us. The thought of co-parenting with people who'd betrayed me so deeply made me feel sick, but I knew I had to find a way to make it work for the child's sake. During this time, my cousin had been quietly working on business plans for our potential partnership. She'd researched the local market, identified our target demographic, and even sketched out renovation ideas for the restaurant space. Her enthusiasm and dedication reminded me that there was still good in the world, still people who could be trusted. But the situation became even more complicated when his wife found out about everything. She showed up at my door one evening, furious and hurt, demanding to know how long I'd known about the affair. When I explained that I'd only discovered it recently, she broke down crying, revealing that she'd suspected something for months but had been too afraid to confront it. Together, we pieced together a timeline of lies and deception that went back almost a year. They'd been incredibly careful, using burner phones and meeting in different towns to avoid detection. His wife had been planning to surprise him with news of her own pregnancy when she discovered the affair, adding another layer of tragedy to an already complicated situation. The four of us, me, her, him, and his wife, found ourselves in this bizarre situation where we were all victims of the same betrayal. His wife suggested we all meet together to figure out how to move forward, especially with 2 babies now involved. The idea terrified me, but I knew we had to find a way to coexist for the sake of the children. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a community center conference room that felt sterile and impersonal. Sitting around that table, looking at the people who'd turned my life upside down, I realized that anger wasn't going to solve anything. We needed to find a way to co-parent effectively while protecting the innocent children caught in the middle of this mess. But then she dropped another bombshell that changed everything once more. She'd been lying about ending the affair. They'd continued seeing each other even after the pregnancy was discovered. His wife's pregnancy had been a lie too, a desperate attempt to save her marriage. The web of deception was so complex that I wondered if I'd ever know the complete truth. That night, I made a decision that would change the course of my life. I called my cousin and told her I was ready to move forward with our business partnership. We spent the next few hours planning how to transform my grandfather's restaurant into something that would honor his memory, while creating new opportunities for both of us. The renovation process became a form of therapy for me. Tearing down walls, painting over old memories, and building something new from the foundation up gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in months. My cousin worked alongside me, her vision and creativity helping to shape a space that felt fresh and full of possibility. Meanwhile, the legal complications of the pregnancy and custody arrangements kept me tethered to my past. Lawyers, mediators, and family court became regular parts of my vocabulary. The stress of it all was overwhelming, but I was determined to be the best father I could be, regardless of the circumstances. As the months passed and her pregnancy progressed, I found myself in the strange position of attending doctor's appointments with someone who'd betrayed me, discussing baby names and nursery themes with a person I could barely stand to be around. But every ultrasound image, every kick I felt when she let me touch her belly, reminded me that this child was innocent and deserved better from all of us. The grand reopening of the restaurant was scheduled for the same week as her due date. It seemed like the universe was testing my ability to handle multiple life-changing events simultaneously. The local paper had written a feature story about our family business transformation, and we'd booked private events for the next 3 months. But then came the call that would bring everything full circle. She was in labor and I was listed as her emergency contact. Racing to the hospital, I realized that despite everything that had happened, I was about to become a father. The excitement and terror of that moment overshadowed all the pain and betrayal of the past year. The delivery was complicated, requiring an emergency procedure that left me pacing the hospital corridors for hours. When the doctor finally emerged to tell me I had a healthy daughter, I felt a surge of love and protectiveness that I'd never experienced before. Holding her for the first time, looking into her tiny face, I knew that everything I'd been through had led to this moment. In the final twist that I never saw coming, she handed me divorce papers along with the birth certificate. She decided to move across the country to start fresh, leaving me with full custody of our daughter. The venue booking request had been her twisted way of saying goodbye. She wanted to get married to him at my restaurant before they left town together, a final act of dominance over the life she was abandoning. Standing in my renovated restaurant, holding my newborn daughter while looking at the divorce papers and venue request, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals lead to the greatest gifts. I had my daughter, my new business, and the chance to build a life that was truly my own. Their request to use my venue would be denied, but not out of spite, simply because I was too busy creating something better to waste time on their dysfunction. The woman who destroyed my old life had inadvertently given me everything I needed to build a new one. My daughter would grow up in a place filled with love, surrounded by family who chose to be there, in a business that represented hope and new beginnings rather than obligation and tradition. As I locked up the restaurant that night, my daughter sleeping peacefully in her carrier, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in over a year. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight I was exactly where I was meant to be. The betrayal that had nearly destroyed me had actually set me free, and for that I was almost grateful.